So as you know, if you've been paying attention, Kasich, I'm suspending my campaign. Lying Ted Cruz, I too am suspending, well, he suspended his first campaign, which leaves just the Trump. So you already know who this is going to be between, as correctly predicted by the Simpsons episode, which correctly predicts a whole lot of things for some reason. Donald Trump versus Hillary Clinton. And as you know, 1988 cover of the magazine, The Economist, which is owned by the Rothschild family, shows 2018, new world currency, paper dollars on fire with the phoenix rising with the giant gold thing around its neck. Wonder what that means in the year 2018, right? And the most recent Economist cover, which was really for this year, 2016, shows the world leaders, the world in 2016. And I don't see Donald Trump. I didn't see Kasich. I didn't see Cruz, Trump, Bernie Sanders. No. But I did, in fact, see Hillary Clinton in the front of that cover in front of everybody. And her husband off to the side. Both of them. They have selected, the club has selected Hillary Clinton to win. I'm sure they'll make it one of the closest races ever. 51-49. We'll get him next time. Can't wait to see how this circus goes later on this year. So Mike Krieger from Liberty Blitzkrieg blog. One man who is not a fan of Trump actually explains why Trump is winning is good for democracy. Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders. Let's see if you already. Well, no, let's try that. While it may sound strange, a coronation of Hillary Clinton in the Democratic primary will mark the end of the party as we know it. There's been a lot written about the Sanders surge, with much of it revolving around Hillary Clinton's extreme personal weakness as a candidate. While this is indisputable, it's also a convenient way for the status quo to exempt itself from fault and discount genuine grassroots anger. I'm of the view that Sanders' support is more about people liking him than disliking Hillary, particularly when it comes to registered Democrats. He's not merely seen as the least bad choice. People really do like him. In other words, lesser of two evils? No, people actually like the guy. The Sanders appeal is twofold. He is seen as an unusually honest and consistent for someone who's held elected office for much of his life. Plus, he advocates a refreshingly anti-establishment view on core issues that matter to an increasing number of Americans. These include militarism, Wall Street bailouts, a two-tiered justice system, the prohibitive cost of college education, healthcare insecurity, and a rigged economy. While Hillary is being forced to pay lip service to these issues, everybody knows she doesn't mean a word of it. She means it less than Obama meant it in 2008, and Obama really didn't mean it. Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders have done America a great deal of good. By running from the political fringes, they have shattered status quo taboos and exposed the two-party political system for the monumental sham it is. Whether you like either one of them is irrelevant. The truth about how undemocratic our elections actually are and the disturbing overlap when it comes to establishment Republicans and Democrats needed exposing, and that's exactly what's happened this election season. Personally, I wanted to see Trump versus Sanders in the general election. I think the public deserves two non-mainstream choices for president for once in their freaking lives. And such a matchup would have provided two distinct, non-status quo visions for the future. That said, Trump versus Clinton is the second best option. The process of awakening that's been happening across the electorate this campaign season is in large part due to the presence of Trump and Sanders, and this awakening is far more important than who wins in November. As Edward Snowden, who was quoted saying in yesterday's piece, a whistleblower's manifesto, fundamentally, in an open society, change has to flow from the bottom to the top. He's right. If you want fundamental, long-term change consistent with constitutional principles, it needs to come from an informed citizenry. America has not had a remotely informed citizenry in over a generation. I would agree with that. The divide and conquer tactics of both establishment parties have been proven tremendously successful in pulling the wool over everybody's eyes and convincing them that there's actually a real difference, when in reality, both parties maintain the exact same position on a vast majority of the nation's key issues, which include support for interventionist wars of imperialism abroad, an embrace of cronyism and corruption throughout the public and private sector, a total pandering to Wall Street and support for taxpayer bailouts without accountability, support for the inhumane failure that is the war on drugs, support for fake free trade deals that are actually corporate giveaways to insiders and donors, and finally, support for the unconstitutional and unaccountable mass surveillance of the American public. I could go on, but you get the point. The interesting thing about the 2016 election is that millions of Americans are finally coming around to rejecting the policies listed above. The status quo, of course, has not, and therein lies the status quo's problem. Between Sanders and Trump, the status quo policy planks listed above have all come under attack. This cannot be allowed, which is precisely why the establishment has relentlessly fought both men in their attempts to win the nomination of their respective parties. The status quo doesn't actually care if a Jeb Bush, Marco Rubio, or Hillary Clinton wins the U.S. presidency. The status quo wins either way, not only because those individuals unquestionably will support the status quo agenda, but more importantly, they will largely refrain from bringing up any real issues during their campaigns. Rather than being fought along the lines of trade deals, Wall Street corruption, and disastrous foreign policy, a Bush versus Clinton matchup, would largely be centered around debates about guns, abortion, transgender bathrooms, and disingenuous talking points about the free market versus big government. The distraction provides fertile ground for continued status quo theft. Let's keep them focused on this garbage, this nonsense, nothing important over here, while we allow the status quo over here to continue raping, plundering, and pillaging the taxpayer. That's a vote for Hillary Clinton is a vote for what I just said. The problem with Trump is Trump brings up some real issues he's not supposed to talk about, just like Sanders has done in the Democratic primary. This is extremely dangerous to the status quo because it teaches the American peasants to question issues and think about stuff they aren't supposed to think about or have an opinion on. There's nothing more dangerous than a public filled with critical thinkers. As George Carlin brilliantly explained so many years ago, and man, oh man, do I love George Carlin, even though he's dead. I still love him. This is from Carlin. The real owners are the big wealthy business interests that control things and make all the important decisions. Forget the politicians, they're an irrelevancy. The politicians are put there to give you the idea that you have freedom of choice. You don't. You have no choice. You have owners. They own you. They own everything. They own all the important land. They own and control corporations. They've long since bought and paid for the Senate, the Congress, the state houses, the city halls. They've got the judges in their back pockets, and they own all the big media companies so that they control just about all the news and information you hear. They've got you by the balls. They've spent billions of dollars every year lobbying to get what they want. Well, we know what they want. They want more for themselves and less for everybody else. But I'll tell you what they don't want. They don't want a population of citizens capable of critical thinking. They don't want well-informed, well-educated people capable of critical thinking. They're not interested in that. That doesn't help them. That's against their interests. They don't want people who are smart enough to sit around the kitchen table and figure out how badly they're getting screwed by a system that threw them overboard 30 freaking years ago. You know what they want? Obedient workers. People who are just smart enough to run the machines and do the paperwork, but just dumb enough to passively accept all these increasingly crappier jobs with the lower pay, the longer hours, reduced benefits, the end of overtime, and the vanishing pension that disappears the minute you go to collect it. Speaking of which, how many videos have I done on pensions recently getting screwed? And now they're coming for your Social Security. They want your freaking retirement money. They want it back so they can give it to their criminal friends on Wall Street. And you know something? They'll get it. They'll get it all sooner or later because they own this freaking place. It's a big club and you ain't in it. You and I are not in the big club. This country is finished. Spoken such true words. George Carlin. How he could get all this out as a comedian and have people laughing and enjoying it is beyond me. Because people don't want to hear this. They don't want to hear government and politics, especially not when you're going to a stand-up, comedy club somewhere, and much less a giant venue like his. He just had a way of doing it. Fantastic. That's all you really need to know. Politicians are irrelevant. They are there to spin issues and make sure the public remains as ignorant, distracted, and divided along inconsequentially themes as possible. The thing the status quo really fears is a population that begins to think outside the box, which is why both Trump and Sanders have been seen as existential threats to their corrupt and putrid sandbox of power. So with all of that out of the way, it makes perfect sense that some establishment Republicans have announced they will support Hillary Clinton. Quick look surprised. Go back and read my status quo policy planks outlined earlier. Any Republican in favor of them will naturally support Hillary Clinton because Hillary Clinton will protect and coddle their racket. This is guaranteed. Trump may also end up coddling the establishment, but the status quo can't be 100% sure. He's a wild card and he's uncaged. They can't have someone like this causing them headaches and potentially getting the plebs all wound up. Now let's turn to Politico to see a little of what I'm talking about from the article Republicans Consider Clinton Over Trump. While many conservative stalwarts are conflicted and stuck in a state of paralysis, some are considering the ultimate betrayal. Hours before Indiana polls closed Tuesday evening, when it was becoming clear that Trump was headed for a decisive win, some prominent Republicans were moving away from him. Mark Salter, John McCain's former campaign speechwriter, signaled his support for Clinton via Twitter. Conservative pundit Ben Howe did the same. Schmidt predicted that, quote, a substantial amount of Republican officials who have worked in Republican administrations, especially on issues of defense and national security, the big club, will endorse Hillary Clinton in the campaign. But the most absolutist opposition to Trump is largely held by the GOP's donor class and Washington-based establishment, the very people Trump and his supporters have delighted in offending from the start. These 4 paragraphs tell you everything you need to know. It's one thing to dislike Trump and decide you are unable to support him. Given some of his rhetoric in the primary, I can certainly understand and respect this position. However, supporting Hillary Clinton, one of the most shady, dishonest, warmongering, corrupt animals the world has ever seen, is a whole other ballgame. It tells you who these so-called conservatives really are. Status quo sycophants. But it's not just Republicans coming out in favor of Clinton. There's increasing evidence that Clinton will target establishment Republicans for votes. As the AP reports, With Donald Trump all but clinching the Republican nomination for president, Hillary Clinton is beginning to explore ways to woo Republicans turned off by the brash billionaire. Quote, "I'm with her," tweeted Mark Salter, a top campaign aide to 2008 Republican nominee John McCain, said on Tuesday. Democrats cautioned their effort to win over Clinton Republicans, or Hillikins, perhaps is in its earliest stages, but could grow to include ads and other outreach targeted in particular at suburban women in battleground states. Already, aides say a number of Republicans have privately told Clinton and her team they plan to break party ranks and support her as soon as Donald Trump formally captures his party's nomination. "We have an informed understanding that we could have the potential to expect support from not just Democrats and independents, but Republicans too," said Clinton spokesman Brian Fallon. "There's a time and place for that support to make itself known." Clinton has begun casting her candidacy in recent days as a cry to unify a divided country. After a series of victories last week, which all but ensured she will capture her party's nomination, Clinton called on Democrats, independents, and what she called thoughtful Republicans to back her bid. Guy Cecil, chief strategist of Priorities USA Action, the super PAC backing her campaign, echoed that language Tuesday night, calling on Democrats, independents, and reasonable Republicans to reject Trump's outdated ideas. Oh yeah, his ideas are outdated. They are, if you want a new world order, one world currency, one world religion, one world government, massively open borders, where the club and their highly paid mini club under them, if you will, that run all their corporations, they'll be filthy rich, and then you and I and everybody else who might be middle class will now just be them and then the rest of us. There'll be just two types of people in the world. The club and everybody else, which you kind of look at it now and say, well, isn't that the way it is now? Yes, but there's still a little bit of, well, middle class. There's some, we still got some of that left. It's not looking good. It's not getting any better. As a matter of fact, it's getting worse. Like I mentioned, these charts that show what a healthy middle class should look like, and then what ours looks like. And it's going down to the poor side, and then the super filthy rich go off the chart. That is not good for a democracy. That is not good for a nation. And this chart was explaining that anytime you didn't have a healthy middle class, it was only a matter of time before the country that you're looking at that chart about failed, collapsed, became something of a distant memory, or a shadow of its former self. So, it says, irrespective of what you think of Trump, his continued survival in the presidential circus is undoubtedly good. Not because he's some sort of savior who will make America great again, but because he's bringing up issues he's not supposed to bring up. Because he's getting people who have given up on the political process engaged again. Because he's convincing tens of millions of Americans that it really is possible to give the status quo the boot. And at the end of the day, it's not the actions of any particular individual that instills true fear in the U.S. establishment and deep state government. What really scares them is a population capable of critical thought beyond the false left-right paradigm talking points. And both Sanders and Trump should be applauded for their roles in this regard. I will strongly agree. If I didn't, I wouldn't be reading this to you. We have a few more months left, right? Several, till we get to voting season, where we get to watch how it really unfolds. If they can rig the election in Egypt so that the Muslim Brotherhood wins 51-49, as Lindsey Williams already said would win previously to that happening, and then saying every other country that they overthrew, Yemen, Libya, and Syria was next, would all get Muslim Brotherhood, which is exactly what happened. Where do you think they got that from? America. You haven't had a legitimate election since maybe Ronald Reagan. I don't even know. So while the numbers look good for Trump right now, I can almost assure you, you're going to be on the edge of your seat as those votes come across in November. Oh my gosh, He's up, she's up. Oh, he's coming back now. Oh my God. Now she's coming back. They're going to make this so entertaining. It'll be the most talked about election probably ever. That's how I see it. Take care.